Siddhartha Gautama, commonly known as the Buddha, was a spiritual teacher and a philosopher. The title Buddha means the awakened one or the enlightened one. His teachings form the foundation of Buddhism, a profound and influential philosophy and religion. Central to Buddhist teachings are the three marks of existence, which illuminate the nature of life and the human experience. The three marks of existence are Anicca, which means impermanence. This teaches us that everything in the world is in a constant state of change and flux. Dukkha, meaning suffering. This acknowledges that life inherently involves suffering and dissatisfaction. And finally, Anatta, which is non-self, challenging the concept of a fixed, unchanging self or soul. Anatta means that there is no permanent self. To put it simply, it means that you're always changing, just like everything else in the world. According to Buddhism, our self is made up of 5 things which they call the 5 aggregates of clinging. These are our physical body, our form, how we feel about things, our feelings, how we see and understand the world, our perception, our consciousness, which is our awareness, and our thoughts and emotions, our mental formations. But none of these things on their own represent our true, unchanging self, because they all change over time. So Anatta doesn't mean no self, but rather no permanent self. It reminds us that nothing in life stays the same forever, including ourselves. Understanding this concept of non-self can help us let go of things and move on in life. It can make us feel free and independent. So here are 6 ways that you can use the idea of non-self to help you move on in life from the wisdom of Buddha. Number 1. Live in the present. Buddha says, "Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment." Imagine you have a favorite toy. You really like playing with it, but it's not going to stay the same forever. Just like how your toy changes and gets old, everything in life changes. What happened in the past is done and gone. The future hasn't happened yet, and even the present moment doesn't last forever. Buddhism teaches that people who understand this idea of things changing are ready to let go of the past and not worry too much about the future. They focus on what's happening right now. A lot of us spend time feeling sad about the past or worried about the future. We wish things were different, or we try to control what's going to happen next. But even if we don't think about the past or future too much, we might not be truly living in the present. We might daydream or think about things that aren't real. So, what's real? According to this principle of Anatta, things change all the time, including who we are. Our sense of who we are is made up of many, small, changing parts. When we think too much about the past or dream about the future, we're focusing on things that aren't real anymore or haven't happened yet. Let's look at regrets, for example. We often spend time thinking about mistakes we made in the past and feel bad about them. But according to this idea, the you who made those mistakes has changed since then. You've learned and grown. There's no need to be hard on yourself for the things you did a long time ago. The same goes for wishing things were like they used to be. That's just a daydream, because people and situations change. If you tried to go back to how things were before, it wouldn't work out, because you're not the same anymore. Thinking too much about these daydreams or unrealistic plans takes away from the real life you have now. It's like spending all your time thinking about imaginary things instead of enjoying what's really happening here, in the present. And what about the future? It's good to plan for it, but sometimes we worry too much. We plan every detail, like exactly what job we'll have or what our house will be like. But life doesn't always go exactly as planned. Plus, we change as people and the world changes too. So those super specific plans might not work out. Remember that you're not exactly who you were in the past, and you won't be exactly the same in the future either. This helps you think more realistically. Will the things you're sad about now still matter in the future? Probably not. Will your future self want the same things you do now? Maybe not. Instead of getting caught up in the past or future, ask yourself what you want and what makes you happy right now. This way, you can let go of what's already happened and what might happen, and focus on what's happening right in front of you. Number 2. Embrace change. According to Buddha, everything that has a beginning has an ending. Make your peace with that, and all will be well. One of the most important pieces of wisdom found in Anatta is the benefit of learning to let things go, which is one of the most important steps in moving on. When you consider yourself not a fixed entity, but rather something to grow, evolve, and to keep experiencing, you'll find that changes in your life are not as disastrous or disrupting as they once seemed. Rather, they're to be embraced. Many people find it difficult to deal with changes in their lives. It can be tough when things don't go the way we want them to. Even when we decided to make changes ourselves, it can still be unsettling and take time to get used to. Some people dislike change so much that they try to avoid it completely. For most of us, too many changes happening all at once can be bothersome. However, change can actually be really beneficial for us and is a crucial part of our lives. Most importantly, we can't escape it. It's bound to happen. If we were to take the concept of Anatta into account with every single thing we do and think, we would be intimately aware of the fleeting nature of everything. Our biggest problem with change is that it takes away what we'd wanted to keep. Whether it's a job, a person, a house, a neighborhood, a certain item, or a relationship, we cling to what we think makes us happy or improves our life. And it's that act of clinging that makes us so very unprepared for its loss. Think of a child who can't sleep without their favorite nightlight. While the light may be wonderful and comforting, by sleeping with it every single night, the child is setting themselves up for failure were it to ever break down. If, however, the child was told that the light might someday break down and that they should practice sleeping without it, they'd be prepared and thus not inconsolable when this warning eventually does come true. And so it is with most things in life. Ask yourself, what do you depend on and can't imagine your life without? Think of its impermanent nature, and however awful it may seem, imagine your life without it. What would your life be like? And how would you move on? It's not only important to be prepared for losses brought on by change, but it's also important to embrace them. As counterintuitive as it may seem, some things shine brighter through their fleeting nature. Sometimes a relationship ends when it's reached its peak, or a house is sold before there have been any negative memories made inside. Instead of mourning the loss of such things, one can also be thankful for how pure and joyful memories of these things will always remain. Change is beautiful. Be thankful for what was, and prepare for that which will come. Only then can you move on from anything. Number 3. Be grateful. In the words of Buddha, let us rise up and be thankful. For if we didn't learn a lot, at least we learned a little. And if we didn't learn a little, at least we didn't get sick. And if we got sick, at least we didn't die. So, let us all be thankful. Buddhism teaches that people should focus on being good and not think only about themselves. Buddhists are not selfish. They find happiness in being happy for what they already have, and not always wanting more. Sometimes we act selfishly because we think we deserve things like rewards, because we're nice or helpful. But thinking like this can make us feel disappointed because we might not always get what we think we deserve. Also, we can't always trust our own feelings about what we deserve or what will make us happy. It's like our own subconscious is tricking ourselves. Buddhism teaches us that there's no fixed self. This means that our feelings and desires change all the time, so it's hard to say we truly deserve something. How can we want something so much when our future self might not even want it anymore? It's like filling up your third plate at an all-you-can-eat buffet. You think you want it right now, but there's a very strong chance that in just a few minutes' time, much of what you took will end up wasted. So, how can we want less and be happier? Well, it's as simple as being thankful for what we already have. When we're thankful, we start to feel good about the things we have, even the small things. This helps us not feel sad about things we lose or things we can't have, and instead helps us focus on what's good now and what will be good in the future. When we're thankful for what we have now, it's easier to let go of things and move on to the next thing in life. Number 4. Increase your confidence. Buddha considers that we are shaped by our thoughts. We become what we think. When the mind is pure, joy follows like a shadow that never leaves. One of the best ways to avoid lingering in the past is to be confident. If one is confident, they don't feel the need to cling to things. When they have themselves, they have enough. Many people think that in order to be confident, you must know yourself and what you have to offer intimately. However, with the concept of Anatta, there's no constant self to know. So how could Anatta make us anything but self-conscious? People have a tendency to forget that we are all works in progress. Our flaws aren't permanent. We can grow out of them or work on ourselves. An inability to acknowledge this, which many people have, is detrimental to our ability to improve. What many get wrong is that a tight view of who you are is more like a cage than anything else. In a strict definition, there's no room for growth. If you describe yourself as kind, you imply that you are already kind, and there's nothing you have to do for that status. But by keeping yourself undefined and realizing you change all the time, you have to be kind again and again in order to consider yourself to be so. Moreover, when you define yourself with bad traits, it becomes way harder to quit bad habits. If you're generally considered to be lazy or impulsive, for example, and you start identifying yourself with such traits, you'll have no motivation to change your habits. How could you be less lazy or impulsive if that's just who you are? How are you expected to move on from who you are? Instead, nobody just is. As Anatta makes clear, we're different people from who we used to be, and we will be different people from who we are now in the future. All the ways that we consider ourselves to be can be put to question day after day. Do you want to be kind? Well, what are you going to do today to achieve that title? How will you behave kindly? And do you wish that you weren't lazy? Well, you don't have to be. How can you act today in order not to deserve that label? Now, the idea isn't to deny your flaws or wave away your insecurities. They are there, and you can feel them. That much is certain. The idea is to not let them define you and not to act accordingly. According to Buddhism, insecurities are unavoidable, but our paralyzing fear when we encounter them is. Insecurities make one feel inadequate, broken, and irredeemable, when, in fact, we are all the very opposite. There is so much room for growth if we allow ourselves to grow instead of cower. So, we should instead embrace our insecurities. We should get to know them, analyze them, and with that knowledge, work on them. Anatta gives you complete freedom to be as you want to be through action and growth. As a result, you'll find that you have complete control over who you are and want to be. Instead of working with what you got, as many put it, you can create yourself. Anything about your personality that you're self-conscious about, you can change, starting now. The confidence, then, should come from your complete freedom to shape yourself. And with the freedom to shape yourself comes the idea that you're not dependent on anything. You can move through this world freely and move on from anything. Number 5. Forgive. To quote Buddha, forgive others not because they deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve peace. One of the hardest human practices, some might say, is the practice of forgiving others. It's also one of the biggest reasons people find they can't move on from some past happening, because they hold grudges. Buddhism is famous for offering gentle lessons on kindness, compassion, and forgiveness. But how could they teach us to forgive those that have wronged us when doing so feels so painful and unnatural? If forgiveness is seen as a gift, then why gift it to people who you feel don't deserve it? Buddhism, however, flips this idea of forgiveness on its head. It's wrong to think of forgiveness as something you do for the person you're forgiving. Instead, you should see it as something you do for yourself. Forgiving others is the hardest to do when you care a lot about what you're supposed to be forgiving them for. If you didn't care, forgiving them wouldn't be that hard. So when you don't forgive people for what they've done to you, you implicitly state that this wrongdoing is something that still haunts you. In other words, you're tied to the past. Without the ability to forgive, we wallow in past hurt and pain. It prevents us from living in the present. It occupies us with what we can't change and prevents us from moving on and growing. A Buddhist story describes two men meeting, one of which had been wrongfully imprisoned for years. The other man asks him if he's forgiven his captors since becoming free. The man says no, never. The former man then says, "Then you're not free at all, but still imprisoned." Think back to the concept of Anatta, our ever-changing self. This goes for others as well. The person we blame for our pain is no longer there, and instead some new version of them has appeared. They were, and still are, as incomplete as we ourselves are. They have more to learn and need more room to grow. The person we're mad at isn't a bad person, but simply a fluid person who did something bad once. We can't view them as who they were forever. Just as we are insecure and make our mistakes, so too others. And so, everyone is forever reshaping themselves into something else. Thus, clinging onto our blame is like living in a fantasy. We're obsessed with someone who no longer exists, with a situation that is long over. Forgiveness is the way to move on. This doesn't mean that you render the actions you forgive as harmless or justified. Forgiveness isn't saying that it's okay to have someone treat you like that. Rather, forgiveness can acknowledge how bad something was without wallowing in it. One of the ways you can practice forgiving others is by meditating on those who wronged you. While you're meditating, imagine a version of yourself as one holding on to the grudge, and another version of yourself that's free from that grudge, happy and forgiving. Ask yourself what version you would like to be. If you chose the second, then imagine the person who hurt you. Try to see their perspective. Why did they hurt you? Did they do it intentionally? Why would they want to do that? Hurting somebody is rarely, if ever, just for the sake of hurting. Really try to understand that, and try to understand the person in question. When you find that you can see why they behaved the way they did, then you can overcome it. End the meditation with being thankful. Thank them for giving you this wonderful opportunity to grow. Because they hurt you and you overcame it, you've learned something new. Forgiveness isn't weak or naive. It's brave. It requires you to let go of the past and move on. And that requires effort and guts. Moreover, when you learn to forgive others, it becomes easier to forgive yourself as well. Forgiveness is like a muscle you train. The more you use it, the more effortless it becomes. Forgiving is essential to moving on, and moving on is essential to our growth and improvement. Number 6. Be compassionate. In our final quote from Buddha for this video, he says, "In compassion lies the world's true strength." To add to the point of forgiveness, there's a crucial point to be made about compassion in general. Compassion in Buddhism is also called karuna. Karuna is, literally said, the wish to free others from pain and suffering. You have to be able to notice others' suffering and be willing to help them recover from it. Contrary to popular belief, it's not enough to just recognize the suffering of others or to empathize. You must want to help too. True compassion is taking action. All of us have probably been compassionate or kind a few times, but it's not nearly as much as we could do, and also not close to what one should practice according to Buddhism. All too often we're preoccupied with our own troubles to notice those of others, and when we do, we feel too busy to be of help. So how could one be more compassionate? Try to think of every human being not just as a passenger or stranger, but as someone's child, parent or friend. Try to think of what you would like to happen if you were in another person's shoes. One of the best ways to learn how to do this is to meditate and use mindfulness. Mindful meditation should help you let go of what preoccupies you and look beyond. It urges one to see the big picture, think objectively, and let go of biases. For example, take a few minutes every day to sit down and think, did I see anyone in need? Could I have helped them? If so, how? Have I been kind today? And how can I be kinder towards others tomorrow? Is there something that prevents me from acting compassionate, and can I change that? Have I judged other people today, and why? What would I feel if I let go of my judgment? These questions might seem simple and obvious, but very few actually take time to consciously think about such things in their day-to-day life, and doing so could do wonders. Karuna is, aside from absolutely necessary for us as a species to survive, one of the greatest motivations to ever exist. You can always relieve someone's suffering or help someone through a tough time. Even when you have nothing else, you have the ability to be there for somebody. Even those who are going through a deep depression can benefit a lot by helping others when someone needs them. It's easier to forget your own pain when confronted by that of someone else, and it also becomes easier to be compassionate towards your own pain after you've been compassionate to another. The more compassion you practice having for others, the more self-compassion you will develop as well.